The sky was calm. 32,000 feet above the ground, Flight 2719 was cruising smoothly through clear blue air. Passengers were sipping coffee. A baby was laughing somewhere near the back. A businessman was typing emails. And then, boom! The left engine exploded like a bomb. The entire aircraft shook violently. Metal tore through the wing. Fire burst outward. The plane rolled hard to the left, nose dipping toward the earth. Screams filled the cabin. Oxygen masks dropped. Overhead bins burst open. The jet began to fall. Inside the cockpit, the captain was killed instantly by flying shrapnel. The first officer slumped unconscious over the controls. No one was flying the plane. 198 passengers. 32,000 feet. And less than 15 minutes before impact. But then something impossible happened. From seat 16B, a small 12-year-old girl quietly unbuckled her seatbelt. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She stood up while grown adults panicked around her. 2 long braids. Oversized hoodie. Backpack still on her shoulders. She walked toward the cockpit. A flight attendant tried to stop her. Passengers shouted at her to sit down. But she kept moving. Because she knew something no one else did. When she stepped inside the cockpit and saw the blood, saw the lifeless captain, saw the controls shaking in empty hands, she didn't freeze. She reached for the radio. Keyed the microphone. And in a small but steady voice said, "This is Phoenix. I have aircraft control." 30 miles away, 2 Black Hawk helicopters monitoring the emergency frequency went silent. Phoenix. That call sign belonged to a Navy commander who died 2 years ago. And that voice. That voice sounded like a child. If you think this sounds impossible, wait until you hear what happened next. Before we continue, comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. And if you love real stories of courage that feel like movies, hit subscribe. Because what this 12-year-old did next, no one saw coming. Flight Horizon 482 was never supposed to be remembered. It was just another routine cross-country flight from Denver to Seattle. A full cabin. 2 experienced pilots in the cockpit. Clear weather reports. Smooth cruising altitude at 32,000 feet. Everything about that morning felt ordinary. In row 16B sat 12-year-old Ava Reynolds. She was small for her age, thin shoulders wrapped in an oversized gray Air Force hoodie that clearly belonged to someone else. The sleeves covered most of her hands. 2 tight braids rested against her shoulders, tied with faded blue ribbons. Her sneakers didn't even touch the floor fully when she sat back. She was flying alone, an unaccompanied minor on her way to visit her grandfather in Washington. It had been almost 2 years since she'd seen him. Almost 2 years since the funeral. Her backpack rested beneath the seat in front of her. Inside it, carefully wrapped in a sweatshirt, was something she never traveled without. A white flight helmet. Cracked along one side. With a red phoenix painted across the top. Most passengers around her didn't even notice her. A man in a navy suit beside her was buried in spreadsheets on his laptop. An elderly woman on the other side flipped slowly through a travel magazine. The cabin lights were dimmed. A few people were asleep. Flight attendants moved casually down the aisle collecting empty cups. It was quiet. Peaceful. The kind of silence that only exists when nothing feels wrong. Ava had her notebook open. She was sketching an aircraft from memory, an F-18, detailed down to the intake vents. She shaded the wings carefully, her tongue slightly pressed against the corner of her mouth in concentration. Outside the window, the sky was endless blue. Then she heard it. A faint, high-pitched whine. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. But Ava did. Her pencil froze mid-stroke. The sound wasn't normal. It was subtle, just slightly off, but she knew that pitch. She'd heard recordings of it dozens of times before. Her eyes slowly lifted toward the left wing. The businessman next to her kept typing. The elderly woman turned another page. No one else heard it. But Ava did. And her heart sank. Because she knew what that sound meant. Seconds later, the sky shattered. Ava Reynolds did not grow up like other kids. While most children learned piano or soccer, Ava learned cockpit layouts before she learned long division. Her mother, Commander Rachel Reynolds, had been one of the Navy's top experimental test pilots. Fearless. Brilliant. The kind of pilot other pilots trusted with their lives. Her call sign was Phoenix. Because no matter how dangerous the aircraft, no matter how many times systems failed Midair, she always brought the plane home. And when Ava was 4 years old, her mother started teaching her. Not casually. Not as a hobby. But seriously. Every evening after school, Ava would sit in a home simulator setup in their garage. A full mock cockpit her mother built piece by piece. Switches labeled. Warning alarms wired in. Emergency scenarios programmed in detail. Again, her mother would say calmly. Engine fire. Again. Hydraulic failure. Again. Total electrical blackout. Again. Ava would practice until her hands moved without hesitation. Until she could recite checklists in her sleep. Until she could identify warning sounds blindfolded. Her mother would sometimes wake her at midnight, play a random emergency alarm, and whisper, "What is it?" Ava would answer instantly. Her mother believed something deeply, something she never fully explained. The sky doesn't forgive hesitation, she would say. And fear is just information. Training is what saves you. 8 years. 8 years of drills. 8 years of simulators. 8 years of emergency landings. Ava didn't understand why it mattered so much. Not until the day everything changed. 2 years ago, her mother left for a classified test flight. A brand new experimental jet. One no one else wanted to fly first. That morning in the kitchen, still wearing her green flight suit, Commander Reynolds knelt in front of her daughter. She placed both hands firmly on Ava's shoulders. "If you're ever in an emergency," she said softly, looking directly into her eyes, "you don't freeze. You don't panic. You fly." Ava had laughed nervously. "Mom, I'm 12. Promise me," her mother insisted. "I promise." That was the last conversation they ever had. The aircraft her mother was testing suffered a catastrophic failure midair. It crashed before she could eject. The Navy called it an accident. Ava never believed it was that simple. After the funeral, she kept training. Every day. Because quitting would mean her mother's lessons meant nothing. Because flying was the only way she still felt close to her. And because somewhere deep down, she had the strange feeling her mother had been preparing her for something specific. Something big. Something terrifying. Back in seat 16B, as that high-pitched engine whine pierced the cabin air, Ava didn't just hear a noise. She heard 8 years of preparation echoing in her mind. And her mother's voice whispering. "Don't freeze." The sound grew sharper. Higher. Wrong. Ava's eyes locked on the left engine outside her window. The metal casing looked steady at first glance, but the vibration, it wasn't normal. It was uneven. Unstable. She felt it in her chest. 3 seconds later. The sky exploded. A deafening blast ripped through the aircraft. The entire cabin jolted violently to the left as if something had punched the wing midair. Metal fragments tore backward in a silver blur. Fire flashed. The businessman beside her slammed into the armrest as his laptop flew to the floor. The elderly woman screamed. Coffee splashed against the ceiling. Overhead bins burst open, luggage tumbling into the aisle. The plane rolled sharply left, far too sharply. Oxygen masks dropped with a hiss. Children began crying. Adults shouted prayers. Someone yelled, "We're going down." The aircraft nose dipped. Hard. That stomach-dropping sensation hit every passenger at once. They were descending. Fast. But Ava didn't scream. She grabbed the window frame and forced herself to look outside. Black smoke poured from the left engine. Jagged holes ripped through its metal housing. Flames flickered along the inner rim. Uncontained engine failure. Her mind said it automatically. She scanned the wing route. Looking for structural damage. Fuel leaks. Fire spreading. The wing looked intact. But the roll angle was increasing. The plane was banking too far left. No correction. No counter input. Which meant. Her heart skipped. No one was flying it. Her brain moved quickly, just like in the simulator. Engine explosion plus violent roll plus no immediate recovery equals possible cockpit damage. Possible cockpit damage equals injured pilots. Injured pilots plus uncontrolled descent equals. She swallowed. Everyone dies. Her breathing became controlled, almost mechanical. Altitude roughly decreasing fast. Judging by the angle and rate, maybe 1,000 to 1,500 feet per minute. If they were at 32,000 feet. They had minutes. Not hours. Minutes. A flight attendant fell near the front of the cabin, trying to regain balance. She grabbed a seat, shouting, "Stay seated. Stay seated." But people were already panicking. One man tried to stand and fell into the aisle. A baby wailed somewhere behind her. The plane shuddered again, violently, as the remaining engine struggled to compensate. The floor beneath Ava's shoes tilted further. The descent angle increased. She heard another alarm through the cockpit door. A specific one. Master caution. Hydraulic warning. Her pulse quickened. She knew those sounds. Her mother had made her memorize them. Over and over. Ava closed her eyes for half a second. And in the darkness, she heard it. Her mother's voice. Calm. Clear. Assess first. Act second. She opened her eyes. Engine 1 destroyed. Aircraft rolling. No correction input. Cockpit not responding. Time remaining, maybe 12 minutes before uncontrolled impact. Unless someone took control. Her hands trembled slightly as she unbuckled her seatbelt. The elderly woman grabbed her wrist. "Sweetheart, sit down." Ava gently pulled free. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. "I have to help." The plane lurched again, nose dipping further. Passengers screamed as the cabin lights flickered. And for the first time since her mother died, Ava understood exactly why she had been trained. Not for a hobby. Not for fun. For this. She stepped into the aisle. And started walking toward the cockpit. The aisle felt like it was moving beneath her. Not just shaking, tilting. Every few steps Ava had to grab a headrest to keep from falling as the aircraft continued its steep descent. "Sit down," someone shouted behind her. A man reached out, trying to pull her back into a seat. She slipped past him. Her heart was pounding now, not from fear, but from urgency. At the front of the cabin stood the senior flight attendant, Monica Hale, 20 years in the air. She had handled turbulence, medical emergencies, even a lightning strike once. But she had never seen an aircraft bank like this without correction. And she had never seen a child walking toward the cockpit during it. "Sweetie." Monica shouted over the noise. "Go back to your seat right now." Ava stopped in front of her. Up close, she looked even younger. Hoodie sleeves covering her hands. Braids slightly loose from turbulence. A faint gap where her front tooth had recently fallen out. But her eyes. Her eyes were steady. "Ma'am," Ava said, breath controlled, "the left engine suffered an uncontained failure. The plane is in a sustained bank. No corrective input has been applied. That means the pilots are incapacitated." Monica blinked. "What?" "My mom was Commander Rachel Reynolds," Ava continued quickly. "Navy test pilot. Call sign Phoenix. She trained me for 8 years in emergency aircraft control. I have over 1,000 simulator hours. I know this aircraft." The plane lurched violently again. Monica grabbed the galley wall to steady herself. "You're 12, she said, stunned. "I know." Another drop. Louder screams behind them. Ava's voice cracked just slightly. "If nobody is flying this plane, we have less than 15 minutes. Monica stared at her. This was insane. Impossible. But the cockpit intercom had been silent since the explosion. No announcements. No reassurance. Nothing. And the descent wasn't correcting. Monica looked toward the cockpit door. Then back at the child in front of her. "Please," Ava said softly. "Let me look." It was the kind of decision that would either destroy Monica's career, or save 198 lives. She turned. Entered the override code. The cockpit door clicked open. Cold air rushed out immediately. And what Ava saw inside would stay with her forever. The captain was slumped forward over the controls. His white shirt soaked red. A jagged shard of metal had shattered the forward window and struck him directly in the chest. He had never even had time to react. The first officer was unconscious in his seat, head bleeding from a deep cut where he'd struck the instrument panel. His chest moved faintly. Alive. But not flying. The aircraft was banked 15 degrees left. Descending rapidly through 28,000 feet. Red warning lights flashed across nearly every panel. Master caution screaming. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Engine 1 dead. Engine 2 vibrating violently. For half a second. Just half. Ava froze. This wasn't a simulator. This wasn't practice. This was blood. This was death. This was real. Then she heard it. Not in the cockpit. Not in the alarms. But in her memory. "When you're scared," her mother's voice said calmly, "that's when training takes over." Ava stepped forward. Climbed into the first officer's seat. Her feet didn't reach the pedals. "I need cushions," she called out. Monica snapped into action, ripping seat cushions from first class, stacking them behind Ava's back, beneath her, boosting her height. Ava adjusted forward. Gripped the control yoke. The aircraft fought her hands immediately, asymmetric thrust from the dead engine pulling left. She swallowed. Forced her breathing steady. Attitude indicator, 15 degrees bank. Altitude, 27,400 and falling. Airspeed, dropping. Hydraulics, unstable. She could hear the passengers screaming behind her. Feel the cold air from the cracked window freezing her fingers. And for the first time since she stood up from her seat, she understood something terrifying. There was no one else coming to fix this. It was her. Or no one. She reached for the radio. And took control. The cockpit smelled like smoke and burning metal. Cold air sliced through the cracked windshield, whipping Ava's braids against her cheeks. The master alarm kept screaming, sharp, relentless, unforgiving. But inside her head, everything went quiet. Training mode. Her hands tightened around the control yoke. The aircraft was still pulling left, fighting her. The dead engine created uneven thrust, dragging the nose sideways. She pushed right rudder as far as her small legs could reach. Nothing. Her feet barely touched the pedals. More cushions, she shouted. Monica shoved another one behind her back. Ava leaned forward, stretching her legs until her toes finally pressed firmly against the rudder pedals. There. Contact. She applied steady pressure. The wings began to level, slowly. Altitude, 26,900 feet. Descent rate, 1,200 feet per minute. Airspeed, bleeding off. Engine 1, 0 thrust. Engine 2, rough vibration warning. She had seconds to stabilize. 3 breaths. 1. 2. 3. She pulled back gently on the yoke. Reduced descent rate. Adjusted throttle on the functioning engine. The aircraft shuddered but responded. It was flying. Barely. But flying. Now she needed help. Her hand moved to the radio panel. For a brief moment, her fingers trembled. This wasn't practice. Every word she said next would determine whether professionals trusted her, or wasted time doubting her. She pressed the transmit switch. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Horizon 482. Left engine explosion. Both pilots incapacitated. Passenger in cockpit with aircraft control. Silence. Then a confused voice crackled back. Horizon 482, say again. Who is transmitting? Ava swallowed. Her voice sounded small in the headset, too small. But steady. Seattle Center, this is Ava Reynolds. I'm 12 years old. My mother was Commander Rachel Reynolds, United States Navy, call sign Phoenix. She trained me to fly. I have aircraft control. There was a long pause. Too long. Inside the Regional Military Air Operations Center, 2 Black Hawk helicopters were already monitoring emergency frequencies. When they heard the word Phoenix, both pilots froze. Did she just say Phoenix? One asked. That call sign belonged to Commander Reynolds, the other replied quietly. She died 2 years ago. Back in the cockpit, the radio came alive again. Passenger identifying as Phoenix, confirm pilot status. Ava's eyes flicked toward the captain's motionless body. Captain is deceased. First officer unconscious with head trauma. I am the only conscious person in the cockpit. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was calculation. The Black Hawk lead pilot keyed in. Phoenix, this is Black Hawk lead, Captain Daniel Mercer. I flew with your mother. Ava's breath caught. He continued, voice steady and strong. She talked about you. Said you could outfly most trainees at 10 years old. I need you to tell me your aircraft status. Something shifted inside her. She wasn't alone anymore. She ran her scan like her mother had drilled into her thousands of times. Altitude 25,800 feet. Descending at 800 feet per minute. Airspeed 240 knots. Engine 1 destroyed. Engine 2 operating at 60% with vibration. Hydraulics unstable but responsive. Fuel approximately 60% remaining. 198 souls on board. Captain Mercer glanced at his co-pilot. That's a textbook emergency report, he muttered. Then back to the radio. Phoenix, you're doing outstanding. First objective, stabilize. Second objective, we bring you home. Ava adjusted the throttle slightly. The aircraft leveled at 24,000 feet. The descent slowed to near neutral. For the first time since the explosion, the nose stopped dropping. In the cabin, passengers felt it. The violent falling sensation eased. Some stopped screaming. Some looked up in confusion. Back in the cockpit, Ava's arms were already aching. Her fingers numb from cold air. But she held steady. Captain Mercer's voice returned. "Phoenix, you have aircraft control. Repeat it for me." She took a breath. "Stronger this time. This is Phoenix. I have aircraft control." And at that moment, the impossible became real. A 12-year-old girl was flying a commercial jet. And the entire sky was listening. The aircraft was stable. But only barely. Ava's arms were shaking from the constant pressure on the controls. The right engine vibrated through the yoke like a living thing fighting to stay alive. Captain Mercer's voice stayed calm in her headset. "Phoenix, listen carefully. At your current weight, single-engine operation won't hold altitude long. You will continue descending. Nearest suitable runway is Seattle-Tacoma. 27 minutes out." Ava checked the descent rate again. It was creeping downward. Gravity was winning. "How long until we can't make it?" she asked quietly. Mercer didn't sugarcoat it. "If we don't regain some thrust, about 20 minutes before you're forced below safe terrain altitude." That meant one thing. Restart the destroyed engine. Her stomach tightened. "I saw flames," she whispered. "There was shrapnel." "I know," Mercer replied. "But without more power, you won't reach the runway." In the cabin behind her, something else was happening. Passengers had begun searching her mother's name. A woman in row 12 gasped as her phone screen loaded. Images of Commander Rachel Reynolds appeared, decorated Navy test pilot, smiling in her flight suit beside experimental jets. The resemblance was undeniable. "That's her daughter," the woman whispered. The news spread row by row. The crying quieted. Fear shifted into something else. Hope. A young mother holding a baby moved closer to the cockpit doorway. She saw Ava's small frame stretched forward, feet barely reaching the pedals. "You're her daughter," she said softly. Ava nodded without turning. "She was my hero." "She's ours too," the woman replied. In first class, a man muttered angrily, "We're trusting a child. This is insane." But even as he said it, the plane was no longer spiraling. It was flying. And everyone knew who was holding it steady. Ava reached for the intercom switch. Her voice echoed through the entire cabin. This is Ava Reynolds. I know you're scared. I am too. But my mom trained me for emergencies like this for 8 years. I know what I'm doing. Please stay calm and follow instructions. I'm going to get you home." Silence. Then. Clapping. One person at first. Then another. Then dozens. It wasn't celebration. It was belief. Back in the cockpit, Mercer spoke again. "Phoenix, time to attempt restart procedure. Walk through it slowly." Ava closed her eyes for half a second. In her mind, she was back in the garage simulator. Her mother standing behind her. Checklist first. Always checklist. She began reciting from memory. Ignition selector, engine 1. Click. Fuel flow check. Confirmed. Starter engage. She pressed the switch. The aircraft shook violently. The engine coughed. Black smoke burst from the left side. The entire frame rattled. "It's not catching," she said, voice tight. Again, Mercer said calmly. "Your mother never quit on a restart." Her throat burned. She wiped tears from her cheek with her shoulder. Again. Ignition. Fuel. Starter. The engine sputtered. Coughed harder. Then. A low roar. Uneven. Rough. But alive. "Engine 1 showing 40% power," she shouted. Descent rate slowed immediately. The aircraft steadied. In the cabin, passengers felt it. The subtle lift. The return of thrust. Cheers broke out again. Captain Mercer let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Phoenix," he said softly, "you just restarted a damaged jet engine at 12 years old." Ava didn't answer. She was crying now. But her hands never left the controls. Seattle Tower came over the frequency. "Phoenix, runway 16 right is being phoned. Emergency equipment staged. Airspace cleared." Foam. That meant they expected fire on landing. The reality of what was ahead settled in. Engine restart bought them time. But landing a damaged aircraft with partial hydraulics. That would be the real test. Mercer's voice steadied her again. "All right, Phoenix. You've given yourself a fighting chance. Now we bring you down." Ava looked ahead through the cracked cockpit window. The clouds were thinning. Seattle was somewhere below. And for the first time since the explosion, she believed they might actually make it. Seattle came into view through the fractured windshield. Gray water. Tall buildings. A thin white runway in the distance, covered in foam like a strip of snow cutting through concrete. Ava's hands were stiff from cold. The cracked cockpit window let freezing air rush across her fingers, numbing them. Every control input required more effort now. Captain Mercer's Black Hawk hovered off her left wing, keeping safe distance. "Phoenix, you're 20 miles out. Time to configure for approach." Her heart pounded. This was it. No more altitude to trade. No more room for error. "Flaps 5 degrees, Mercer instructed. Ava reached for the flap lever and eased it down. The aircraft shuddered as the flaps extended. Airspeed dropped slightly. The damaged engine screamed in protest. "Feels unstable," she said. "That's expected. Stay ahead of it. You're doing great. 10 miles out. Flaps 15. Prepare for gear." She moved the lever again. The vibration intensified. Warning lights flickered across the panel. The aircraft felt heavier now, like it didn't want to stay airborne. "Gear down." Ava swallowed and pulled the landing gear lever. There was a loud grinding noise beneath the floor. A violent shake. Then warning tones. She scanned the indicator panel. 2 green lights. 1 red. Her stomach dropped. "Nose gear not locked," she said, voice tightening. For half a second, fear flooded her mind. If the nose gear collapsed on touchdown, the aircraft could flip. Sparks. Fire. Explosion. "Phoenix, listen carefully," Mercer said calmly. "There's a manual extension system. Lower right panel. Pull the emergency release handle." Her hands trembled as she searched. Found it. Pulled. There was a heavy mechanical thunk beneath them. She checked the lights again. 1. 2. 3 green. "Gear down and locked," she breathed. "Outstanding," Mercer replied. Inside the cabin, passengers could now clearly see the runway. Fire trucks lined both sides. Emergency lights flashing red and blue. The foam made the runway look small. Too small. Ava's breathing quickened. 5 miles out. "Full flaps, 30 degrees, Mercer instructed. She lowered them slowly. The aircraft slowed dramatically. Airspeed dropped toward 140 knots. "Careful," Mercer warned. "Below 135 and you stall." She added slight power. The damaged engine coughed but held. At 3,000 feet, her voice finally cracked. "Captain Mercer, what if I mess this up?" Silence for half a beat. Then his voice, firm, steady. "Your mother didn't train you to doubt yourself. She trained you to execute. Trust the numbers. Trust your hands. She blinked away tears. The runway filled her windshield now. White foam. Emergency crews waiting. Hundreds of lives depending on the next 60 seconds. 1,000 feet. You're perfectly aligned, Mercer said. Don't chase the runway. Let it come to you. Her legs were shaking from constant rudder pressure. 500 feet. The Black Hawk peeled away to give her clear airspace. You've got it from here, Phoenix. 200 feet. The ground rushed upward. The runway looked impossibly narrow. Too fast. Too small. I'm scared, she whispered. That's normal, Mercer replied. You're almost home. 100 feet. She remembered her mother's voice from hundreds of simulator landings. Flare at 50. Gentle. Let the main wheels touch first. 50 feet. Pull back, now. She eased the yoke toward her chest. The nose lifted. The aircraft sank. The ground surged upward. The runway rushed up at her like a wall. 50 feet. Ava pulled back gently on the yoke. The nose lifted. The sink rate slowed. For a split second, everything felt weightless. Then. Thud. The main landing gear slammed into the foam-covered runway. The aircraft bounced. Harder than she expected. The cockpit rattled violently. Warning alarms screamed again. Hold it steady. Captain Mercer shouted in her headset. Ava fought the controls, easing the nose down carefully. The front wheels kissed the runway. They were down. They were on the ground. But they were still flying at nearly 150 knots. Brakes, Phoenix. Full brakes. She shoved her feet forward. The pedals barely moved. They were too stiff. Too heavy. She stood up in the seat, pressing with her entire body weight. The aircraft roared down the runway, foam spraying in massive white waves behind them. Emergency vehicles raced alongside. The end of the runway loomed closer. Too close. Her legs burned from the pressure. Come on, she whispered through clenched teeth. The speed dropped. 120 knots. But they were running out of runway. The foam streaks were thinning. Concrete markers flashing past faster than she wanted. More brakes. Mercer urged. She pushed harder. Her small frame shaking from the effort. The damaged engines groaned. 60 knots. The runway end was right there. 30 knots. The aircraft shuddered. And stopped. Silence. Absolute silence. Only 300 feet of runway remained. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Then. The cabin exploded. Screaming. Crying. Applause so loud it drowned out the engine noise. Passengers hugging strangers. Falling to their knees. Praying. Laughing and sobbing at the same time. In the cockpit, Ava's hands were still locked around the yoke. Her whole body shaking uncontrollably. She couldn't feel her fingers. She couldn't feel her legs. She looked down at the instrument panel. They had done it. They were alive. Her breath broke. She reached down to the floor, grabbing her backpack with trembling hands. From inside, she pulled out the cracked white flight helmet. The red phoenix painted across the top was faded, but still bright enough to see. She placed it gently on her head. It slid down too far over her eyes. She didn't care. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered into the empty cockpit. I did it, Mom. Outside, fire crews surrounded the aircraft, spraying foam onto the damaged engine. Inside, Monica rushed forward and wrapped Ava in a tight embrace. You saved us, she whispered, voice breaking. You saved every one of us. Ava finally let go of the controls. And she cried. Not because she was scared anymore. Not because she was tired. But because the one person she wanted to tell wasn't there. And yet somehow, she felt like she had been. Emergency crews flooded the aircraft within seconds. Paramedics rushed into the cockpit. The first officer was pulled from his seat, stabilized, and carried out. He would survive, a concussion, a deep head wound, but alive. The captain did not. They covered him gently before removing him from the cockpit. Ava watched silently. The reality of what had happened was settling in now. Passengers evacuated down emergency slides, but many didn't leave immediately. They looked for her first. The young mother with the baby found her near the cockpit door. "You brought my daughter home," she said through tears. "You gave her a future." An elderly veteran saluted her with shaking hands. The businessman who had doubted her earlier stood there, eyes red. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "You were braver than all of us." Ava couldn't speak. She just nodded. Because the weight of it all was finally crashing over her. That night, the image of a 12-year-old girl in an oversized flight helmet sitting in the cockpit of a commercial jet went global. News channels interrupted programming. Child lands passenger jet after engine explosion. Daughter of fallen Navy pilot saves 198 lives. Her name trended worldwide. But Ava wasn't watching any of it. She was at her grandfather's house, curled up in her mother's hoodie, unable to sleep. 3 days later, a black government sedan pulled into the driveway. Rear Admiral Thomas Kincaid stepped out. He had served with Commander Rachel Reynolds for nearly a decade. Inside the living room, he sat across from Ava. "She talked about you constantly," he said gently. "You were her greatest achievement." Ava looked down at her hands. Then why did she keep flying those dangerous missions? The Admiral took a breath. Because she discovered something. He opened a classified folder. Photos. Reports. Investigations. The aircraft she was testing had serious defects. Flaws the manufacturer tried to hide. She was preparing to testify. To expose them. Ava's chest tightened. They killed her. The Admiral nodded slowly. Yes. The silence in the room was heavy. She knew she was in danger, he continued. That's why she trained you so hard. She wanted you strong. Prepared. Able to survive anything. He placed 2 items in Ava's hands. Her mother's Navy pilot wings. And her medal for valor. She would want you to have these. Ava's fingers closed around them. The Admiral then handed her a sealed envelope. In her mother's handwriting. Ava opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter. Her mother's final words. "My Phoenix. If you are reading this, then something happened to me. I need you to know, I was never afraid of flying. The only thing I feared, was leaving you unprepared. So I gave you everything I had. If the day ever comes when you're scared, remember this, you are capable. You are trained. You are stronger than fear. If I fall, you rise. That's what Phoenix means. I love you beyond the sky." Ava read it 3 times. Then she made a decision. 2 months later, she stood at a naval air station during a memorial ceremony honoring her mother. Pilots from across the country gathered. She stepped up to the microphone, barely tall enough to reach it. "My mom didn't train me to be fearless," she said. "She trained me to act even when I was afraid." The crowd stood silent. She believed that protecting people mattered more than protecting herself. And because of her, 198 families went home. She placed the cracked helmet at the base of her mother's memorial stone. "And I'm going to finish what she started." The crowd erupted in applause. Time passed. A year later, At 13, Ava sat in the back seat of a Navy training jet under special authorization. Her instructor, Lieutenant Commander Maya Chen, smiled through the intercom. "You fly like her." Ava looked at the horizon. "She's still teaching me." Mid-flight, an emergency call came over the radio. A small civilian plane. Pilot incapacitated. Student alone. Panicking. Commander Chen turned slightly. "You want to talk him through it?" Ava smiled. "Permission granted." She keyed the radio. "Cessna 734, this is Navy Trainer 42. My name is Ava Reynolds. I know you're scared. I've been there. But you're not alone." Step by step, she guided him down. When the small plane landed safely, Ava felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was legacy. Years later, Ava Reynolds would become one of the youngest test pilots in Navy history. She would uncover hidden defects. She would save lives. And she would keep her mother's cracked helmet in her locker, always. Because call signs don't disappear. They're passed on. And somewhere above the clouds, in the endless blue sky, the Phoenix was still flying.